Hi again. Well, I thought this would be really peaceful right here, but there are cars whizzing by. It still is kind of a cool little spot. Little creek here, summertime. Anywho, I'm actually kind of fascinated by it too, staring at the cars in the creek. Okay, so this is the second video on some of the analogies or comparisons we use when talking about climate change, global warming. So let's stand up here. Not to be pedantic, and some people might really be bored by this or think, why are you talking about blanket analogies or even criticizing or critiquing the idea of the greenhouse effect? I agree. Seems stupid. But the thing is, we're asked to make life-altering and societal-altering decisions based on some of these simple analogies. I mean, people, they get incensed if you question, like I said, the greenhouse effect, or the idea that our atmosphere is a greenhouse, or the idea that CO2 acts like a blanket. Do you think that any of our senators have actually gone out there and tested what's going on in the atmosphere? Or are they doing the same thing? They say, the CO2 goes up in the atmosphere, it acts like a blanket, it heats up things, then melts other things and heats up other things, and then remelts other things, or it's just the cycle goes on and on. So it seems to me like one of the things you do when you test a hypothesis even is going back and figuring out what parts of your comparisons and your analogies actually hold weight and what parts you're testing. So in the last video, we talked about how CO2 acts as a blanket or doesn't act as a blanket, and some of the I guess deceptive parts of the analogy, maybe where it breaks down, with greenhouses and blankets. And to me, it seems like one of the key deceptive features of those analogies is that they seem to insinuate that there's some hard barrier up in the atmosphere, up again at the top of the troposphere, I guess. They seem to insinuate that CO2 is up there. It's way up there, just hanging out. It's grabbing that sweet infrared radiation and it's throwing some back down to Earth. It's throwing some up to space. It's dishing some out all around, and then it's holding on to some. Hence, how it heats up the atmosphere and acts as a blanket. So we talked about how a blanket actually heats you up or keeps you warm, though, and so I think that's one of the ways where that analogy breaks down, is that a blanket keeps you warm by stopping convection, right? It traps some heat. Sorry, it traps some air in between you and the blanket, your body and the blanket, and it keeps it from mixing with the cooler gases around, the cooler air around, right? Okay, so if there's not a hard barrier up there, and CO2 exists, throughout all the troposphere here, then what's going on? It's grabbing some heat and then dishing other heat, I guess, off in the form of radiation and/or conducting it to the molecules around it, throughout the environment, the atmosphere. So it seems to me like if there is a blanket, it's more like a big down comforter or something, right? It's a huge down comforter, miles high, goes from the ground all the way up to the top of the troposphere. But even there, what that blanket is doing, what a down comforter is doing, is trapping air inside the down and inside the layers of the blanket, and it's keeping that air from mixing around and mixing too quickly, right, with the air around. So I do think that this is very important, and the same thing, like we were talking about, goes on within the greenhouse. There's not a hard barrier there, in our environment, atmosphere, keeping the CO2 in the air inside the greenhouse from rising and from mixing with the cooler air around. So I just wanted to clarify that a bit, and maybe we can move on from some of these analogies. But like I said, I do think that's important. It's like I wanted to stop and talk about it does seem kind of pedantic to go over and over and to dive into these analogies too much. But then again, like I said, we're asked to make life-altering decisions, even like who we associate with, and some like who we're going to throw in prison and who not, based somewhat on these analogies. So we should probably figure out where they apply and where they don't.